the gender predation paradigm. Here's the uncomfortable truth we need to face. Female promiscuity and adult content creation are the female counterparts to male criminality. Both are warped versions of the masculine ideal of strength and the feminine ideal of beauty. This is the core of what we'll call the gender predation paradigm. How male and female failure modes mirror each other when cultural guardrails collapse. These modes aren't identical to one another in practice, but they serve the same function: exploit one's biological advantage to prey on the weak and pull resources from them. And the consequences are the same: societal decay. When men's pathology goes unchecked, communities collapse into violence. When women's pathology goes unchecked, relationships collapse into mistrust, loneliness, and demographic decline. Men evolved strength for protection and provision. Women evolved beauty and fertility cues for pair bonding and long-term stability. These weren't arbitrary, but rather survival tools. Without family structure, stigma, or strong community norms, these traits turn predatory. Men's pathology is obvious: aggression, risk-taking, exploitation through force. Women's pathology mirrors it through a different channel: leveraging sexuality for attention, money, and short-term resource extraction. Both emerge from the same root: fatherlessness, weak communities, and the erosion of shared ideals. When duty disappears, instincts fill the vacuum and society pays the price. So, can masculine and feminine ideals be restored, or have we crossed a point of no return?
Well, I definitely think they can be restored. I'll tell you why. It's because I think that's our default mode. We are wired a certain way. We are wired over more than 1 million years of how there is a significant difference between men and women and masculine and feminine. And it's a sliding scale. Some men are less masculine, others are more. Same with females. Some are more feminine, some are less. And you see a bit of a crossover, and that's perfectly fine. But there's an exception and a rule, right? And the rule generally is you do fill these different roles in society, and you do have this way of being programmed because it's in your DNA. Right. So right now we're going through this gauntlet of society and media telling us that they're all the same, and that there's all this crossover. And like you said, there's a lot of these things happening where you're seeing predatory action from both sides in different ways. It's a very interesting point. But I do believe it can be restored. I just think we have to get to the region beta paradox point of this, which, if people aren't familiar, we talk about it frequently enough, is where when something's bad, you won't really do anything about it. You'll just sort of struggle and get by. But when it's bad enough, you'll make the change. And the reason I believe this to be the case is because a good portion of society, I would say 10 to 15%, already feel that it's bad enough and have gone back the other way. Like hard line back the other way. They are homesteading, farms, teaching their kids to be more resourceful, more resilient, more capable, outside of what current society is sort of giving these kids. They're taking their kids out of the education system and doing a lot more private schooling or homeschooling. And you're actually seeing sort of this parallel education economy grow, where there's like groups of kids now from the community where they're all getting together and kind of doing like a private homeschool with one teacher. That's just part of it. But ultimately, you are seeing a good portion of society. And don't get me wrong, these are still the ones that were strong and would have wanted a more masculine, feminine world anyway. But they are sort of putting their foot down, and they are doing more than just providing for themselves in this way. They are creating the schools. They are helping other people learn the homestead process. There are communities now that are popping up where there's multiple families living together. And I'm not necessarily saying that is like the ultimate solution. All I'm saying is that's the sign that it is actually going back the other way.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's a very challenging uphill battle because you're constantly being inundated through the media, through social media, through policy, through politics, through the Liberal Party, through Democrats. I'm sure some Republicans are doing it too. That there's no difference, and that this crossover doesn't exist, and that they're trying to wash these things away. But again, I just think sort of like this prehistoric, how we're built DNA will work its way through this problem.
Yeah. I think actually our default mode is that more negative aspect. Like if you go look at kind of more, less civilized cultures, then you kind of see these things actually on a larger scale than ours. And I think it's much more our cultural evolution that kind of puts these guardrails on us. And that's largely what we've been seeing with this erosion of culture, which has been definitely a planned event, for the last 10 to 15 years aggressively. I know it goes back decades further than that, but this, post-national idea of no independent cultures from one another, that we'll just have this one big global one. But through that erosion, we've been reverting back to these more nefarious styles of how gender plays out. But I do agree with you that I am hopeful in the sense where I see more and more people going the opposite route, in the sense where I think there was even a study that came out recently over the last week or two, or not a study, but a poll about how alcohol intake among the youth generation is the lowest in like 50 years or something like
wild.
that.
I give you some
like
stats on that. I may mess up the numbers slightly, but they were doing a breakdown. It might have been America, it might have been global. I think it was anyway. The figures were broken down by generation. So there was like the boomer generation were consuming like $32 billion of alcohol annually. The Gen X were like $28 billion annually. The millennials were like $34 billion. It was pretty crazy. Gen Z was 3. They were 10% of the market. They were only 10% of the generational comparison in the market. It was wild.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Only 54% of people across the board reporting consumption of alcohol, the lowest level since Gallup began tracking the trend in 1939.
Yeah, it's wild.
So it's the lowest it's ever been since being tracked. Yeah, that's crazy. But you think about what's downstream from alcohol, right? It lowers your inhibitions, and then you make poor decisions.
Oh, alcohol is the real gateway drug, people.
Yeah.
It's not.
It really is.
It's not like smoke some marijuana, you're going to do some crazy shit. No, you're not.
Yeah.
You're going to sit on the couch and watch a Disney movie and eat a bag of chips.
Yeah. I know a bunch of people that, or not necessarily anymore, but I've definitely been around a bunch of people before that it's like, they have 2 beers and they're like, let's get into the nose beers next. And you're just like,
you guys ready to party? Like, whoa.
Yeah.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah, but I've never seen somebody smoke a joint and then just been like, hey, we should try heroin now.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I see this trend, and actually there was another one that came out recently about how the nightclub industry is starting to struggle because more and more young people are focusing on their health. And so I do see definitely positive trends in the other direction, but I also think it's very important that we understand these roles and these duties and what it means to be masculine, what it means to be feminine, and try to actually live up to them. And I've made this point before as well, as I think what we've been living through, and actually because there was that recent, his name was Humberto Carollo of White Ribbon, right? He testified in Parliament recently that we need to censor male fitness influencers because they are leading men into misogyny and hateful tropes and blah, blah, blah.
That dude's such an asshat.
Yeah.
What are you talking about, bro?
I ripped him pretty hard, but it's true. It's because you go look at him. He is probably about 100 pounds overweight. There's nothing impressive about him. Even when he's talking about these things, he's not speaking with any conviction. He doesn't believe it. And this is exactly what I think Nietzsche was pointing out when it comes to what he would call slave morality, which is weak people that don't feel like they can create their own circumstances will try to tear down the ideals of the higher and more stronger people. And so that's exactly what you're seeing here is that, okay, well, I can't live up to this masculine ideal.
Yes.
So therefore my only goal, well, he could actually, it's completely in his control to start changing his behavior, but his only option then, if he takes that power away from himself of change, is to then remove the ideal and say nobody should live up to that. It's a stupid, oppressive, dark ideal that we need to get rid of and censor and blah, 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 because then he essentially pulls the people off of the ladder above him.
Yeah, it feels a little like communism for gender. It's kind of like finding the lowest common denominator in the bottom half and being like, everybody's got to stay down here. It's interesting though, you talk about like trying to implement these kind of ideals with kids. You know what I mean? That's kind of where I'm at now with having Jackson and, going to have more kids. So our thought process is like the day you become a man, essentially, is when you give back more to society than you take. Until then, you're a boy. But your goal is to get there. Your goal is to get there in a very productive way and do more for the world than you are taking from it. And that's kind of the way we see it. Like that's kind of the macro concept we are now trying to teach our boy. You know what I mean? And it is different for girls. It absolutely is. But this is the way we see things. So, and it's interesting because, you know, Megan, my wife, she is a old school feminist. Actually believes in equality for men and women and that they should have equal opportunities and that they should be treated equally. But this is like early 2000s, not what the word means today. And it's been interesting because she's been repelled by what it's become and what it represents now and how it's tearing down masculinity and what that's doing to men and to boys. And so it's been interesting to watch her go through this transformation. I've kind of always been on this page with my boys and how I was raised and how I wanted to raise them. But it's like, she's now like leading the charge. She's like a step ahead of me. Be like, no. We need to instill these values in our boys. This is how the world works. And we need to bring this back to the world because it's falling apart. But yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's where it starts. And it gives me the confidence that we can restore these things. But again, it just takes collective action like we talked about earlier.
Yeah. I also think individual action leads to that collective action. Correct. In the sense where people learn, you know, monkey see, monkey do. Yes. It's not that you know, it's great that we sit down here and a lot of the times I am very grateful for it just for being able to explore these ideas and think on the go and kind of shape my worldview as we go through this. But I think, and I learned this a long time ago, that I don't think that what we're doing in terms, or podcasts in general, actually, you know what? No. As I say, think on the go, I'm definitely going to change my view. They can change because whether it be David Goggins, Jordan Peterson, all of these types that I listen to very much, they did change the way that I behave and go forward in the world. But I think the best way is just to be a symbol of that in the sense where, you know, okay, for instance, Jackson, not to say that I'm having any role at whatsoever in your child's life, but just even like the 2 times I've gone upstairs recently, he's now like started like squatting and we'll do squats together. Right. And it's just like, you know, I can't sit there and say, hey, Jackson, because he's incapable of understanding this at this point. Jackson, you know, if you squat, your legs will get stronger and then you'll feel better and things will be good. It's just like, he just sees me doing the thing and then just goes, I want to join.
Let's go.
And it's like, we like to think that adults are much more logic and kind of evolved in that sense, but it's really not. Like I was having a conversation with a family member recently about somebody that we both know, where when I was around them and working out a lot, they were extremely healthy and they were doing the same thing and talking about, oh, well, I need to buy a new wardrobe because all my clothes don't fit anymore. And then I moved out of that town and all of a sudden just reverted back to normal.
Yeah.
And you go, I didn't ever make a comment to that person once about, hey, you need to get your shit together, or you need to do this or that. It was just like, oh, he's doing it, I should do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's individual action leads to collective action. I think that's ultimately what it is. You decide you're going to make that change, what we're going to do for our boy. He's going to instill those values in others, and it's going to continue to spread. Like, he's not going to go to some, like, if he hangs out with kids when he's older, whatever, if this ideology permeates, he will squash that. He will be a stronger character and he will do his best to make sure those things move forward as well, as will we. So yeah, I totally agree. It's that individual action that leads to collective.
I think the best way to wrap up that topic is actually a quote by Marcus Aurelius, which I really love, where he said, stop arguing about what a good man is, just be one.
Yeah, perfect.
And, yeah.
He was such a G.
Yeah.
Damn.